All right. Are you selling on Amazon and you're just curious, is it possible to build a brand off Amazon? Or you are building your brand off Amazon and you're just looking for some best practices as to what others are doing? Well, I'm really excited to have with me today someone who I met when I was at a TAS meetup in Fort Worth, Texas. Talking to this guy, turns out we went to rival high schools in Richardson, Texas. He still lives in Richardson. I live in Florida. But come to find out, we're both super excited about the e-commerce world. And if when you're listening to this podcast, if the story starts to sound a little bit familiar, which it did for me as we were talking, come to find out, my guest here today has been on both Tropical MBA and the Tim Ferriss podcast. So if it sounds a little bit familiar, my good friend here, Allen Walton, is going to tell us a little bit about his story. So Allen, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. Thanks.
Yeah, so this will be a lot of fun. So just for those who are listening, maybe they have listened to the podcast and they just, or one of your previous interviews and they need a refresher, or someone hasn't heard your story before. Tell us a little bit about how'd you get into this whole e-commerce world?
Oh man, long and winding road. Basically, yeah, so I run a company called Spy Guy. We do surveillance products, cameras, hidden cameras, GPS trackers, covert audio, bug detectors, really weird niche. And I got started in this security space back in 2009. So it's been just over 10 years now, 10 years and a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job at a security store that sold surveillance cameras, CCTV equipment for businesses, homes, and they would work with police departments and private investigators and lawyers and all sorts of really interesting people doing interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to just the CCTV systems, I also sold the hidden cameras, GPS trackers, covert audio, and that's what really interested me. Just working in a spy shop. And yeah, so I got to do the whole retail sales thing, face-to-face in a brick and mortar store. And then eventually I went on to help somebody else start in an online store, same niche and everything, just working for somebody else.
Nice.
And then I worked over there for about 2 years and then had enough of that. I'd read the 4-Hour Workweek and just had met a lot of other cool business owners while I was working at these other companies and decided that to just go ahead and start my own online store.
Cool. So basically you were working in a brick and mortar world and you took what you learned from the brick and mortar world and applied it to online. So what was kind of that pivotal moment that made you say, why don't I take what I've learned here and apply it to my own business?
So I kind of need to take a couple steps back and talk about, I was working in the brick and mortar store. I was there for about 2 years. Just had problems with management and stuff. Apparently I was not very cooperative, is what they would say. And so one of my customers was a pretty popular reality TV show called Cheaters. It's filmed in Dallas. It was on for, a decade and a half.
Yeah, I remember that show.
Yeah, and
it's an interesting show.
Yeah. So they would get people calling them asking for private investigator services from all over the country, thousands and thousands of calls. And that's, not what they did. They were a TV show. And they were customers of mine. They would get equipment. And one day they came in and were like, hey, we have this idea of opening our own brick and mortar spy shop and calling it Cheater Spy Shop. And we want you to do that for us. Are you interested? And I was like, well, I'm interested, but I don't want to run a brick and mortar store because it's awful. So let's do an online store. And they're like, all right, let's do it. Make it happen. And like that day I quit my job and then I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought starting an online or a Yahoo store for dummies, because Yahoo was like the prevalent e-commerce platform.
Wow, that's going back.
2011. Yeah. And so I went and did an online store for them and was there for almost 3 years. And that's when I really cut my teeth on e-commerce and learning online advertising and just I was doing it all by myself. And one day I had a call with somebody who was above me, and we just had a falling out. They didn't see things the way that I did, and I felt like I was overworked and underappreciated and ready to move on. And I had just met so many cool people that were running their own businesses and had showed and that had told me that I had what it takes to go out and do it on my own. And about a month after I quit my job at that company, I was like, it's time to either put up or shut up. I was so interested. I was a giant Tim Ferriss fanboy, loved 4-Hour Work Week, all the other stuff. I'd read all the case studies on his website about other people that have actually made that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I've got this specialized knowledge and I feel like I have an opportunity here. And that's when I decided to launch my own store. And I did it on Shopify and never sold on Amazon in the last 5 years.
And that's interesting because so many of us were like, almost like Amazon's like crack, like, like we got to get our head of Amazon, and it's like hard to break off of Amazon. And you've done all
Yeah.
this off Amazon. So why is it just for everyone listening, how come you've not really focused much on Amazon?
There are several different reasons, and it all changes based on like the timeline that I've been on with Spy Guy the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started the company, the reason I wasn't on Amazon was because I felt like I had no control whatsoever on the return policy. So it's my understanding. See, I'm about to reveal how little I actually know about Amazon. It's my understanding that it's
Keep
pretty
going.
much the 30-day return policy, right? And a lot of my customers, they buy these items because they've got a problem going on. Like they think their kid's a drug dealer, or they think their spouse is cheating on them, or they think their employee is stealing equipment. Who knows? All sorts of reasons. And people buy this stuff and then they get an answer like 48 hours later. And then they're like, wow, I just spent hundreds of dollars on this hidden camera that I don't even need anymore. So I'm just going to return it. And we get people that try to do that with us just on our own website.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine that's how it would be on Amazon. Actually, I don't have to imagine, because back when I was at that other company um, and we were selling online, we gave Amazon a test drive and we killed it like 2 weeks later. This was back in like 2012.
Okay.
We killed it because people were filing A to Z complaints, and even
Mm.
though like we had documentation that they had like talked to us and we had provided tech support, and that even they told us that they were successful in using the product to get the information that they wanted, and they would still file a return, and it just really hurt. Like we couldn't stay in business like that. So when I did Spy Guy back in 2014, we had a 14-day return policy because we have competitors and stuff, and they have return policies, and we can't just be a zero refunds granted
Right, right,
company.
right.
So nobody would do business with us. So we made it 14. Yeah, and so that was one major reason. Another reason is like some of our products are straight up banned on Amazon. So it's in the what's that? They have the list of products that are
Prohibited. Yeah.
prohibited items. So
Mm-hmm.
like covert voice recorders and stuff. Can't sell
Oh,
those.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, can't sell those. Can't do hidden cameras. Can't do phone monitoring software. Um, yeah, so a lot of them are just straight up banned on Amazon, and no way around that.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
yeah, so you're basically selling electronics.
yeah,
And your electronics, as other people I've talked to in the electronics space, electronics can be difficult because there is more customer service and there can be more returns. And I can see how in your case you'd have a unique challenge, because if someone's got like a USB port for their computer, chances are they're going to need it for a length of time. But for you, like they have this itch they have to scratch of getting an answer for whatever their situation is. But once they get it, now they have it. So I could see how maybe that would make things a little bit more difficult on Amazon for you. So
definitely. Yeah.
in general, in the e-commerce world, people tend to preach, oh, you don't want to get into electronics. You got into electronics. What's it like selling electronics and trying to find manufacturers for that?
Well, I'm not technical at all. Um, I did like a web design class when I was in high school,
Right.
and that's about it. Um, so it was incredibly hard getting started to manufacture my own products. Um, I've had dreams of doing it for years, and I just didn't even know where to start because I I didn't know what PCB was, a printed circuit board. I didn't know how I didn't know that how you know hardware, and then you add in the firmware, and then you add in the software, and now you've got this whole um, uh, the buzzword IoT, Internet of Things. And so now people want to be
Mm,
able to access their camera on their phone, which like 10 years ago when I started wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even
right, right.
popular. Uh, and um, it's been really hard. I also didn't have any technical friends. Everyone I knew that was selling, like, I hang out in the e-commerce world, the online entrepreneur world. Nobody's doing electronics except for like
Right.
one guy. And I've tried talking to him, and he's not like returning any of my emails. uh, it's hard. It's hard, and the margins are low, and you have to go through like you know people who are selling other items, they come up with an item and then that's like pretty much it. You manufacture it. If something's not right, oh, okay, we can just tweak this and then you're good. Not with electronics. With
Right.
electronics, um, you have to think of the product you want, like the absolute final product that you want,
Hmm.
and just absolutely nail it from the beginning. Because if you don't,
Mm,
so you go through like the first phase, like you come up with the printed circuit board, you come up with all of the electronics, and then you have to make a plastic enclosure for it, and all this stuff has to connect and be
yeah.
assembled in the correct way. Well, oh, you know what? We screwed up one thing. We forgot this feature. So now we have to redesign the entire freaking thing, and we have to spend more money, right?
Hmm.
And you just keep coming. What is it called? Oh, there's a phrase for it. I think graphic designers use it. It's like design creep.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
basically the
Feature
same thing
creep
for
or something like
hardware,
that. Yeah.
feature creep, something like that,
Yeah.
where just as stuff moves along, you realize all the mistakes you made back in part one, and you like can't go back and fix it. Or if you absolutely have to go back and fix it, then you have to pay more money to make it all
Yeah.
happen. And so it's just very time consuming.
Uh-huh.
Everything's got to play nice. There's electronics have a higher defective rate than like supplements and leather bags, so you
Right.
have to deal with that too. They're really low margin. Um, you also have to provide tech support if the customer can't figure out how to use it. Like, I'm just not super excited about electronics, to be honest. But
But you're still
it's
doing
what
it
I know.
though.
I'm still doing it. Well, now I'm in too deep, right? Like
Right.
I've finally figured it out. I cheated a little bit though. So I mentioned this when I was on Tim Ferriss's podcast that I was having
Okay.
trouble with manufacturing electronics, and then that's when everyone contacted me. So I couldn't find anyone on my own. But then when I mentioned it on his podcast, I'm barraged with emails from people that are wanting to help. So
Right, right.
that was nice. And we're great. Now we figured it out.
Yeah. So now you have like a whole slew of other people that, are at least interested in electronics
Yeah, yeah,
that you can
yep.
chat with.
Plenty of contacts now that we can
Yeah.
tap if we need to for electronics manufacturing.
Nice, nice. What's interesting about your story is it's like, well, you kind of at least understood the end product because you worked in the brick and mortar and the online space selling it, but you didn't have the background necessarily in producing it, but you
Right.
didn't let that stop you. You said, I'm going to figure it out. So I'm assuming, like, for example, when you were working for the one company that had a reality TV show, they probably were getting traffic based on the fact that they had a hit
Well, they
TV
had
show.
commercials in the TV show for the
Right.
online store. Yeah, that's how they're getting all their traffic.
So they're getting all this traffic because they've got a nationally syndicated TV
Right.
show. And
Yep.
I remember seeing that show quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I would always get excited because it was filmed in Dallas, and I would like try to
You'd
like
recognize
where
stuff.
they are. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I think they're like in
Hey, they're at Collin
Greenville.
Creek Mall.
You're right
And
there at Collin Creek Mall, which people
yeah.
listen to play like, where are these places they're mentioning? But bottom line, they brought traffic. So now that you decided you were going to go out and build your own store, and you sounds like you pretty much pushed all your chips in and said, I'm doing this. Was that,
Yeah.
am I understanding that correct? You went all in when you did it as opposed to starting it on the side.
Yeah. So I didn't want to take any chances at, you know,
You didn't want a conflict of
former
interest.
employers. Yeah, former
Right.
employers, conflict of interest. I had no interest in dealing with legal matters and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I was really unhappy with my job, and so I just quit because I was unhappy, not because I had any
Sure.
plans to start another company. And then about a month after, I basically didn't do anything for like an entire month, other than just like kind of I like unwind from that stress and processing everything that's going on. And then I looked at my bank account and I realized it was like not doing so well once I stopped putting money into it. I'm like, okay, I need to
Tends
figure
to work
something
that
out.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to figure something out. And so that's when, um, I thought about working for other people, and
Hmm.
but I also thought about just doing it for myself because I have this kind of specialized knowledge on the spy and surveillance niche,
Hmm.
and I already knew where to source all the products, and I knew what the margins were, and I knew what all the um, I knew how to generate online traffic.
Hmm.
Eventually, we had to figure out ways outside of the TV show commercials to actually
Mm.
generate traffic for the website, and so I took the time to do that. And I'd gone to conferences, I'd met people that had figured it out, and I kind of leaned on them a little bit to. I mean, I had one guy in particular who had he sat down with me. I was at an event in Vegas called I can't remember what the name of the event was. We were in town for this internet marketing event, and
Hmm.
he sat down with me and with a yellow pad and a pen was like, "Dude, I'm trying to think of all these different ideas that you could do if you wanted to work for somebody else." And then like a week later, we hopped on a call like this, and we
Hmm.
chat. It was supposed to be like a 45-minute call, and it being 3 hours, and he just generously he's running like a $15 million a year company, and he's
Oh,
sitting
wow.
here chatting with me. I'm like 20, like 4 25 at the time, and actually, yeah, closer to like 26 actually. But he's doing. Had a 3 hour call, and he's showing me everything on the back end of his website, which was also run on Yahoo stores. He's like, yeah, so we generate this much, and this is what my payroll is, and these are my operating expenses, and this is what we do for this other client of mine because he did consulting and stuff, and
Mm.
it was like eye-opening for me. Like was just very um, uh, very giving with the information that he shared, and that just kind of reinforced in my mind that I had what it takes to start my own thing.
Nice. So it sounds like along the way you've had some good mentors. How have
Yeah, for
you
sure.
how have you been able to find mentors? Because it sounds like you did what a lot of us do when we don't necessarily know anyone. We just pick up a book or a podcast and we get to the knowledge of that person. So kind of going on a little bit of a tangent here. What was that like meeting your early mentor, the author of the 4 hour work week, Tim Ferriss, and getting to chat with him and be on his show?
Oh, okay, so there was like two parts in there. Like I had mentors early on, and then like what was it like to do the
Yeah,
Tim Ferriss?
let's start. Let's focus here on the Tim Ferriss part, and then we'll come back to your earlier mentors.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I had met Tim Ferriss before we did the podcast. I mean, he didn't remember probably, but I went to this conference several years ago, and he was like the keynote speaker,
Hmm.
and he jumped off the stage, and I basically just hopped out of my seat to catch him on his way out. He
Oh,
had like an Uber ready to go. He's a busy guy, and I went up to him, and there were other people there too with books, and they wanted autographs and stuff, and I went up and I was like, Tim, thanks for everything, man. And that's all I said. And I got a photo.
oh,
And
sweet.
that's, yeah. And then I got a quick photo, and it was like so cathartic because like my whole life had been like transformed by his work and all the stuff that he's done.
Hmm.
And plus, he's just a really cool guy. Like, I'd love to hang out with him, just like
Yeah, I'm sure you get lots
do
of gold
nothing.
nuggets talking to
So,
Tim.
yeah. And so, that was extremely cathartic. And then we did the podcast, which was actually set up through Elaine Pofelt. She is a writer, and I
Okay.
had met her through a service called Help a Reporter Out, which
Okay.
is it was actually mentioned in the 4 Hour Work Week. I was trying
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
some media attention, and basically I send like 3 emails out a day with reporters who are looking for sources.
Uh-huh.
It's not as good as it used to be. I actually stopped getting them like 6 months ago because it was just like garbage at this point. But
Okay.
it used to be really good, and you would see reporters from like New York Times and Washington Post and Forbes. And so she
Mm.
was doing an article for Forbes about $1 million one-person businesses. And I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, this is my article. Nobody else, there's not many of these out there. And so I responded, and then it turned into an article that was published on Forbes. It didn't do too popular, but I kind of made my best effort to get it in front of Tim. And so I basically just monitored his Twitter for like when he was posting something authentic and it wasn't like a scheduled post.
Mhm.
And so my phone would go off the instant that he would post something on Twitter. And if it was like a real post, like right at that moment, and he's asking for advice, I was like, hey, Tim, I was featured in this Forbes article and you're mentioned and your photo's on here. And so he saw it and then shared it with everyone. And then it got
Oh,
like
sweet.
300,000 views like in the next week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I've just been good about, trying to, we also have like a lot of mutual friends. And so I think my name is kind of cropped up here and there. And so anyways, Elaine, she ended up getting a book deal and she has the same publisher as Tim. And I'm pretty sure that's how they connected. And she pitched him the idea of doing like 4-hour work week case studies because um, after my article, she had met all these other $1 million one-person businesses,
Mhm.
and that's what her book was about. And a lot of them said that they were inspired by the 4-hour work week. And so she's like, hey, you should do like a podcast episode where you talk about 4-hour work week case studies. And Tim was like, dude, that's one of my most requested topics. And he had never done that on his podcast before. And
Mm.
so that's when I got a call from Elaine asking if I wanted to be on. And then I was on there like the next day.
Oh,
So
wow. That's quick.
I was going to Austin for an event anyway. That's where Tim lives. And I was going to
Okay.
Austin for an event. And that Elaine was throwing. And she's like, hey, do you want to be on Tim's podcast while you're down here? And I'm like, yeah. And so it was really cool. It was fantastic. We got to talk for like 2.5, 3 hours or something.
Oh, nice.
And it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. So you had the chance to be on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and we'll make sure to um, link to that episode in the description in case anyone wants to listen to that. I thought it was a really good interview.
Yeah. It's the one, it's like one after LeBron James. I like saying that.
I followed LeBron James.
Yeah. I'm like the one after LeBron James. Actually, there was like one other person afterwards, but
Close
it's fun
enough.
to be able to say that. Yeah.
Close enough. Yeah, I've been on podcast, the same podcast that people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Yeah.
LeBron James have been on.
High
That's
performing
cool.
athletes and entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Nice. So going back to the earlier part of my original question there of like you've had a lot of mentors along the way. So you got this like call with the guy who had the $15 million a year business and and you've connected with people. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of people listening to this. Well, I'm going to say a lot of people listening to this. Just in general, I know a lot of people sit behind their keyboard and think they're just going to figure everything out, or they want to meet, someone who can help them. And it sounds like your help, whether it be from someone who's kind of like a peer or a mentor, has helped you a lot along the way. How
Yeah.
have you found people to help you outside of Tim Ferriss?
Um, there's a lot of different ways. So I was really active in some online communities.
Hmm.
So one of them is Ecommerce Fuel.
Hmm.
I'm like, I've been, it started as I think it started out as just a blog from another guy that had read the 4-hour work week. And he was
Hmm.
talking about his, entrepreneur journey. And so I read his blog and then it turned into a podcast. And then he decided to open up a private community and for other store owners. And at the time, I think pretty much anyone that was doing something in e-commerce couldn't get in. And now it's like a really, like, you got to be doing like 6, 7, 8 figures or whatever to get in
Hmm.
now. And there's so many people in there that were asking questions and sharing what they knew and experiences that they had. And, you know, it was a paid community and it's like kind of exclusive, I guess. And so it filters out a lot of the riffraff from like, other entrepreneurs that are just trying to like toy with the idea of entrepreneurship, but
Mm.
they're asking like a lot of questions that have been answered before, and nobody that is actually busy with like an e-commerce store wants to deal with that sort of thing. And so the private community kind of fostered this environment where people can be forthcoming and help other people out and make business deals and sell their businesses to other forum members and all this other really exciting stuff. And
Hmm.
so just by participating on those forums and sharing what I knew and then actually meeting those people, then it turned into a real event. And so we had an event in Austin where all the forum members met each other for the first time. And so that's when you meet everybody and make like even stronger connections.
Yeah.
And yeah, going to events has been really helpful for me. I, the first like few years that I was doing the e-commerce thing, I would learn a ton at the events, and now not so much. I mean, it depends on the event, but a lot of times I go to events not to get any content, like to learn stuff from the event, but to actually just be around all of the people that are there. And so there's this thing now, I guess, called unconferencing. It's where everyone goes to the city that the event is taking place in, but they don't
Okay.
actually attend the event. It's
Oh,
just everyone's
interesting.
going to be there anyways. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So like it happened earlier this month or last month at the internet retailer thing in Chicago. It's like the
Hmm.
biggest on like e-commerce convention like in the world,
Hmm.
and it's like all week long. I can rattle off, you know, a ton of friends who flew to Chicago because the event was taking place, but they didn't even go
Mm.
to the event. They just wanted to get lunch and get dinner with people that they had met at the event like years prior, or maybe they're like forum members and that sort of stuff. So
So bottom line, it's just go where the people are, whether it's an online
yeah,
forum and
totally.
it's one where people are a little bit maybe more vetted. Because that way, if they're at least they're more likely to be a little bit above where you're at, so that way you can
Right.
learn from them. You're going to meet people face to face. Any other tips or suggestions that you've had along the way with meeting influential people?
Um, yes, I have several.
All
I
right,
don't know if I can. I don't know if I can get all of them out, and I'm not sure that I can get them out in a way that is like very eloquent. But
just try, and I'm sure we can all digest it. I'm
so
intrigued.
so I don't know how to put this because I don't want to come off as being like full of myself or anything like that. My guiding outlook nowadays is like if I'm doing interesting things, then I'm going to meet interesting people. Like that attracts
Okay.
interesting people. Um, and so now I just try to do as much as I can and share what I know with other people, and that kind of just attracts. I think people call it a lot of attraction. I don't really know, but
Like a
I'm just trying
boomerang
to.
effect.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be uh, as helpful, as entertaining as possible. Not like I'm putting on an act or anything like that,
Sure.
but just having like real conversations with people
Hmm.
and trying to have a good time. That really just goes a long way. And it was really easy to not do that when I first started out because like I was totally just an online like junkie. Like I was playing like before I started these companies and stuff, I was like obsessed with World of Warcraft. And so I would do that all day long when I wasn't like going to college and I didn't have a job. I would play that for like 14 hours a day or something for like years.
Hmm.
And so I was totally used to just sitting behind my keyboard, not having like real conversations with people like face to face. I wasn't like super healthy. I didn't like my appearance at all and that sort of stuff. And that's just like a downward spiral. And so
Mm.
once I really got it together and I became interested in like, you know, um, what is it? Behavioral psychology. And then I was really interested in like, okay, what can I do? Like self-help, personal development stuff. I got really interested in that.
Hmm.
And so then I just got interested in like, okay, how can I try to be as helpful to other people as possible? And maybe I can like make these connections and be introduced to people. And then uh, I can have one friend of mine meet another friend of mine and they hit it off and then they like start a business together or whatever. Like you just try to make sure you try to make as everything as fun and as entertaining as possible and everyone's just having a good time. That tends to work for me. I don't know if it's the personality quirk that I have. I certainly think I I don't think I was born with it or anything like that. I think I actually had to foster and develop that like quite a bit. I used to be extremely shy, and now I just try to. Now I can just strap a conversation with like anyone about pretty much anything, and as long as you just like get outside of your own head and are willing to like engage with people, I just find good things come from that. So I don't know what the overarching message here is,
Well,
but I think
I,
if you just try to do interesting things and work on yourself and just be fun to be around or knowledgeable about things, then good things tend to happen.
that's a very good point. And like I've heard it said before, like in order to attract the people you want to attract into your life, you must be an attractive person. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to look like a supermodel. That just means, to your point, that you're engaging,
Right.
you're helpful, you're willing to, you know, do things that might interest others and not just, talk about yourself, but,
Right.
willing to do things to help other people and to give to others. And, that all works and it comes back to you. So yeah, that's all great advice. And,
I got another thing real
oh,
quick, if you don't
please.
mind. But I had a couple of other things going for me. Number one, I was young, and people are much more willing to help a dude who's 20 years old than they are willing to help a dude who's 30 years old, and even more so for somebody who's like 40 years old. There's just no interest in there. Maybe because they see something in, the 20-year-old, or they see some potential or something like that.
Hmm.
But I definitely showed like a willingness to learn and
Mm,
apply advice that was given to me. Whereas, see, a problem that I have now, people ask me for advice and all this other stuff, and at first I was like, sure, let's do this. I'll share all this information with you, and then they didn't do anything with it, and nothing drives me crazier than spending like my time to
yes.
try and help somebody out, and then they don't do it at all. But I was very receptive to feedback that I was getting and advice, and especially like unsolicited advice. There's this whole thing about like never take like unsolicited advice from people. I love unsolicited advice. Maybe there's something
Mm,
that I'm doing that I don't know that I'm doing, and somebody points it out to me. I'm like, oh, hey, this person's right. I really need to fix this behavior because it's like unattractive. And so showing an interest in improving myself and fixing any just weird quirks and issues that I have, um, uh, that seems to go well with people who are like higher up on the totem pole than I am, and like I'm trying to get advice from them or whatever. Also, I never use the word "pick your brain." People
mm.
who know a lot of stuff hate that.
Right.
Nobody wants to be
It's
asked to
usually
have their
not a
brain
2-second
picked,
thing
so
if someone
just
says they
remove
want to
that
pick
from
your
your
brain.
vocabulary. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But what's interesting there is like, and I agree with you that like when I was younger, there was a certain level of people who want to take you under their wing. As I've gotten a little bit older, I've found that the relationship, although people may not want to necessarily take you under their wing, they're willing to look at you a little bit more as a peer quicker. And so to your point, it's just, I think it almost like the relationship you have with others, you have to be willing to give more into it. Whereas like
totally.
when you're
Yeah,
younger, you just have to follow through more. And because
yeah.
I remember when I was younger, I was a manager at Walt Disney World fairly young. And not that that's like this huge position, but like they would
Pretty
have
cool.
these
It's a big
college
company.
interns. Yeah, it was a pretty cool job, straight out of college. And then there was a lot of, we had interns and they all would want to like know, how do I become a manager? And then I would say, oh, I think you should go talk to this person. And they would never follow up with it. I'm like, are you kidding me? I
Yeah,
even teed it
yeah.
up for you. I told them
I
you'd be
know.
coming to them. I told them you'd be coming at 11 o'clock and you didn't show up. What happened? But, it's like just the little things of following through, or as you're getting older, being willing to give a little bit more in the relationship. And I think as we get older, we have a better understanding of what that looks like. And if we're not totally sure, it's time to start doing more and investing in the front end with not expecting something in the back end. Because pick your
Yeah,
brain usually implies somebody wants something. And the more you're willing to give to others, the more it's going to come back to
yeah.
you.
Give more than you get. It's kind of the phrase to use. Yeah.
Exactly. And without expectation. And then you're amazed what comes back.
Oh, without expectation by far. Like
Yeah.
things that I do it without expecting anything in return. And there's this, yeah, I read it in a book once. The author uses a term called covert contracts. It's where
Okay.
it it's a contract that's not actually said, but
Mm,
it's like, if you do this for me, or if I do this for you, then you will do this for me. That's a covert contract.
right.
And so you just can't do that. And I think I definitely had that problem when I was younger, and I sorted it all out. And now you just do something with the expectation that it's not going to be like, that they're going to like pay you back, or quid pro quo,
Hmm.
quid pro quo, gosh,
Yeah. This for
that sort
that.
of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And if they do it, then that's awesome. But you shouldn't be, doing these covert contract things where you're expecting somebody else to do something just because you did something for them. You should kind of do it selflessly,
Hmm.
and if it might work out in the end, you never know.
Exactly. And people detect when there's that quid pro
Yeah,
quo, that I want something in return. So the more we can give. Yeah. So now going back a little bit into earlier, we were talking about you figured out, when you were working for someone else on e-commerce, how to start driving more traffic. Now that was a while ago, so things have changed. So what is working today? Like if you were to have to start your store over from scratch, how would you drive traffic to your store?
I mean, for instantaneous traffic, then Google Ads, Google
Hmm.
AdWords, Google Shopping, that whole network, that's fantastic. Just paid ads, Facebook ads, of course. We're even dabbling in like Instagram ads now too. I
Mm.
actually closed a sale through Facebook Messenger the other day,
Oh yeah.
which like blew my mind because I never really thought of that as like a huge channel. I know there's a lot of people out there that do think it's like this huge channel, like Messenger marketing and
Hmm.
closing sales that way. I didn't think it would work for us because my customers tend to be discreet. Like they don't even want us like emailing their order confirmations because they can be
Oh,
really
gotcha.
upset
Because you
and
never know
paranoid.
who might see the
Yeah, they don't
might
want to give
buy
their
it from
phone
there.
number. I'm still pretty convinced that they don't want to be sharing their like Facebook ID with us. But
Right.
yeah, but again, we closed like a $200 sale just because we had a Facebook ad. Somebody sent us a message on there, and then I was logged into my personal profile account. It's like, hey, somebody messaged Spy Guy, and I'm like, what? And then I answered their question, and they ordered it like 10 minutes later, and it blew my
Oh,
mind.
nice.
But anyways, back to the whole thing. Yeah, it's really easy to set up ads, get your product feed going, like if you're on Shopify.
Hmm.
Um, and as long as you like set a budget, like when I started, I had like $100 a day budget or whatever, and I was self-taught in AdWords. Like I read a book on Google AdWords. I've read
Hmm.
a book on Facebook advertising. Um, and then I actually worked while I was starting my company. I actually looked was looking for some side gigs on Craigslist, and I saw a dude that was interested in um, doing. He was wanting to take on a paid ads apprentice, and so I actually learned a lot through him because he was managing some huge accounts. He's
Another
out in
mentor.
Frisco. Yeah, another mentor. He's out in Frisco, out in the middle of like it's a pretty popular area now,
Right.
and but I wouldn't have known about him at all, like to this day, unless I saw this ad on Craigslist looking for a paid ads apprentice. And so I drive out to his house every morning and spend the day over there managing his paid ad accounts for some really big companies. Like C's
Hmm.
Candy was like one of his clients.
Oh wow.
Simple Human, they make like trash cans and all this other stuff.
Hmm.
And so I got to see all of the back end for a lot of really high end, high spend advertising campaigns, and I was able to apply that to my own company too. So yeah, I totally think paid ads can work. If you should at least have a basic understanding of how it works before you outsource it. That way, you know if the contractor's like actually doing a good job.
Right.
Um,
Because they can just tell you the story of like, oh yeah, we got your traffic. This is as good as it can get.
yeah, and I mean SEO is still great. It takes a long time to rank. If you're looking for a crash course and that sort of thing, I think there's a guy that's online. We're like Twitter friends. We've never met in person, but his name's Nat Eliason. He's got some really fantastic stuff on his website for people who are interested in all different types of things. But his big thing is he owns an SEO agency and he also owns an e-commerce company. They sell tea, and he's actually documented the entire from from before he even started this company to where it is now. He's documented like every single step, and it's all like on his website.
Hmm.
And I've gotten a ton of valuable info regarding SEO in particular and how he goes about doing SEO competitor research and keyword research and all this other stuff. And then the Ahrefs, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but the Ahrefs tool is really
Right.
useful for figuring out what's going on in your niche as well.
That's cool. So if you were to start off in ads, would you go into like everything or would you focus your budget maybe on one ads channel?
I think it totally depends on what you're selling and who you're marketing to,
Hmm.
because like my stuff makes sense to be doing Google ads because people are
Mm.
searching for the type of product that we sell or like the problem that they have, right?
Hmm.
And they can type that into Google, and then that's like highly qualified traffic, right? But it's really hard to target my audience on Facebook. Like we just can't make it work.
Okay.
They don't
Yeah.
have any common interests or demographic or whatever. It's
Right.
impossible. But I got a buddy of mine that sells crochet stuff, like crochet hooks,
Hmm.
and his whole thing is Facebook because they have all these pages and communities already for people who are into crochet and knitting and all this other stuff, and he can just easily target them through Facebook, but he can't really make it work on Google Ads. So I
Mhm.
think it depends on where your people are hanging out at.
That makes sense because previous to me going 100% full time in e-commerce, I was working in an insurance agency, and we tried Facebook ads and we had trouble with it. But search ads we did great at because they're
Yeah.
searching for a particular problem or they need a insurance
And that's
quote.
funny that you mentioned that, because almost all the ads I see nowadays on Instagram are for like Lemonade, which is an insurance company, and
Oh,
then
really?
yeah, Lemonade. I see their ads all the time, along with some other life insurance company, and so I just see all these life insurance ads all the time.
They might have figured it out better than we did.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they got a bunch of funding and they're just blowing through all of it and
Yeah,
put it
we'll just keep
in a crater.
testing it. Just keep throwing more. Maybe they have an ads guy that keeps saying, "Yeah, just keep spending more. It'll be good.
They don't
Maybe
even do a
spend
good
another
job.
million."
Yeah, they don't even do. I mean, I'm kind of going on a tangent now, but the life insurance company, I just had a kid like 6 months ago, and so everyone's like, "You got to get life insurance." And so I finally applied for it through a company that I saw on Instagram, at Ladder Life Insurance. You guys are terrible at Instagram or just marketing in general. Because like I applied, they had a doctor, or not a doctor, they had somebody come out and do blood draw and like ask me all these questions about were you prescribed this 6 years ago, all this other stuff. And then they came back at me and like, all right, you're approved. And then I'm like, wait, you guys only approved me for X amount. I wanted Y amount. And like, oh, you
Mhm.
got to go through the whole application process again in that case. I'm like, you don't just, I just can't change the number. And they're like, no, you got to fill out like the
Oh,
20-page
wow.
online application again.
Yeah, that's
And I'm like,
crazy.
oh, forget that. And then they never followed up by email.
Oh,
They
wow.
just let the temporary insurance like just run its course. They never followed up. They never asked why I didn't sign. Like they did like almost everything wrong. They caught my initial attention with the ad, but then after that, they did everything wrong. And who knows how much it costs to like their customer acquisition costs. That
Well,
might have cost
life
multiple
insurance is
money.
not inexpensive to market to. So to your point, the key is making sure you got a follow-up sequence,
Yeah,
that makes
absolutely.
sense and, target them again, and whatever the case
You got
is.
these huge companies that did like everything wrong. As long as you can like manage, like you can probably manage to out like uh, I think people who are listening to this and the people that we hang out with, they know that
Mhm.
they need to be following up with customers and finding out why they didn't purchase, or maybe trying to save the sale or whatever. I think that that's like marketing 101 stuff, and even the big guys like aren't even really doing it.
Well, and that's the thing is, as a small company, you can be agile, so you can do things and try different things and make the process better for the customer. And having worked
Yeah,
for
totally.
two Fortune 500 companies, I know decisions like on something easy can take months and everybody wants to make a move on it, but it's like there's always a waiting game for, well, these guys or the people down the hall or this other
Yeah.
department in another part of the country or
There's a
whatever.
really good book called Personal MBA
Okay.
by Josh Kaufman, and he talks about that because he was like I think he was like a big time, like probably a manager or something like that at Procter and Gamble. He was
Hmm.
just talking about how everything like had to be approved by like a million different departments and how
Right.
slow everything was, and how they had to do all this market testing before they even like release a product. And so yeah, they're big behemoths and they move slow, and so that's where we come in, is where we're quick to quick to evolve and adapt and stuff like that based on what we're feeling out there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. And we should never take that for granted that just because maybe we're smaller doesn't mean that we have to act small. In fact, we can act fast,
Right.
to try different things. So, is there any advice you would give to yourself, um, if you were like looking back at you when you were maybe 6 months into it? Like, what would you have done differently? Or, any pertinent advice that would make sense to give to yourself in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing I would say is don't get into electronic. No, it would actually be to make SEO a priority early on, like from day one,
Hmm.
because I was able to get success through paid ads in the beginning, right? And pretty quickly, like 1 year, 2 years, I was making more per month than I thought I was going to be making for an entire year.
Hmm.
And I didn't change my priorities at all. I actually got really disinterested, like, in the business, and I basically had it on autopilot for like a couple of years, and I just didn't want to work on it at all. And I should have been investing in SEO, because organic traffic was making up such like single digit traffic to
Mm,
our website. And if I had put in all that effort back then right now I could probably just shut off all my ad campaigns. And like, yeah, we'd shrink in size, but like we'd be really lean, right?
right.
And so I was overly dependent on a single traffic channel, and that's just like brutal. I mean, you should find out what works for you, and there's probably going to be one channel that makes up like 50% of your sales, or even more, like 80% of your sales. And so yeah, you should go all out on it, but you got to have a backup plan. You got to find a way, like Google could decide that they just don't want me to sell. They don't want to show spy stuff at all on Google Shopping,
Mm.
and then that would be a big problem. And I hope that doesn't happen. I'm thinking about asking you to cut this part out so I don't get any bright ideas. But yeah, it would suck. And so if I had laid all that groundwork earlier on, then things would be a lot better.
Yeah. So, is there any books that you would recommend to yourself in that earlier situation, or someone who is in that, maybe like, they're building the business and it's not quite where they want it to be just yet? Like, what would be those books that you might recommend besides Personal MBA or 4 Hour Work Week?
Um, Millionaire Fastlane. My friend Travis gave me a copy, like
Hmm.
probably 6 months after I started my business, and I thought that was really helpful for reframing some just perspective, I guess. Really good for mindset, right? Teaching you to be more a producer than a consumer, and if you want to make millions, you got to like reach millions. It was the right book at the right time. I think so. What have we talked about? Tropical MBA. Or no, that that's a podcast. We talked about
Personal MBA,
personal
4 Hour
MBA,
Work Week, and
4 Hour Work Week, Millionaire Fastlane.
Millionaire Fastlane
I
by
really
MJ
liked.
DeMarco.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, there's so many books. I really liked building a story brand. I'm
Hmm.
like, I think branding is so important, and uh, so like if you take a look at my website, you can tell that I've spent a lot of time perfecting like the just perception of my company.
Hmm.
And I think branding is so important, and building a story brand, it's fantastic. It talks about how you need to see things. They take the hero's journey and then they turn it into like an entrepreneur kind of thing, where
Hmm.
your customer's a hero, and then we, the business owners, are the guide, and we want to set them up with the right product or service so that they can achieve their goals and all this other stuff. Really, really helpful. And it kind of gets you thinking about funnels. And so now we have like story brand guides for like people who are interested in GPS trackers. They go down like one path, and then people who are interested in hidden cameras, they
Mm.
go down a different path. And it's just, and then we have like personas and stuff, avatar, whatever you want to call it, for the different. We have so many different ones because so many different people need our product, but it helps us get in those customers' heads and figure out the best way to steer them. I thought that was one of the best reads I had last year for like marketing. Um, Back when I started, I read Perry Marshall's Google Ads book, and it was good. Don't get the For Dummies one. I thought that one wasn't very good. They got a lot of stuff wrong. Um, Let
Okay.
me see. The I have my crappy bookshelf over here that I bought, and I haven't moved any books onto it. They're all at my
Yeah. If
house.
anyone's listening and
Uh,
watching on YouTube, you got a bookshelf in the background, but I think it looks nice.
Thanks. Um, I can't see any of the names of them because I haven't set them up
Well,
correctly.
either
Um,
way, I think you've given a good list, though.
22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. I liked Mark Cuban's book, How to Win at the Sport of Business. I thought that was really
Oh,
cool.
okay. Let's check that
Yeah,
one. I haven't heard that one.
I think it's like free on Kindle.
Okay.
It's a quick read. It's really good. Um, I like. There's also a lot of content online that I read. So I like following writers like Ramit Sethi, really good, really smart guy. He started out like in personal finance, and he's since branched out into I think like building a rich life. And so starting
Mm.
your own business. And he talks about behavioral. I think his mentor is like Jay Abraham, who's like a big direct,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, guy. Um, what's his book? Getting everything you can out of all you got. I haven't read it, but
Okay. Yeah. It's
I
by
know a
Jay
lot of people
Abraham.
that have
Yep.
said that's really good. Yeah. Gosh, I'm gonna give you a list, and you can post it on the website.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
feel kind of like
You
I
know
gave
what?
you
I
all.
think you've far surpassed the expectations of anyone who heard that question. You've done a
Oh,
great
can I
job.
do one more?
Oh, please,
Uh,
please.
this is like oh gosh, it's so good. It's by Ryan Holiday. It's not
Okay.
his stoicism stuff, which everyone hypes. It's trust me, I'm lying. It's
Oh, okay. That was
it's a
one of his
media
first ones, right?
manipulation. It's
Yeah.
the first one. Yeah, it's a book on media manipulation
Okay.
and just how the media works. Basically, they're operating based on clicks, right? So they come up with the most outrageous headlines possible and all this
Hmm.
other stuff. But he talks about his time at American Apparel, where he was like VP of marketing, and how he was able to do all of this crazy stuff, like get in the news for free and generate tons of like media attention for a. There was a movie at the time based on Tucker Max, a big
Okay.
internet blogger. He had a book called like I hope they serve beer in hell was the name of the book, and they turned it into a movie, and then he generated all this fake outrage to get more attention in the media. So like he actually like vandalized a billboard for the movie, and then he called the media and we're like, oh my gosh, people really don't want this movie out. So the media would then cover all of the fake outrage.
Oh my God.
It's really interesting, but it
Interesting.
teaches you about
Very
how
interesting. I will
reporters
have to. I
think,
have not.
journalists think. Yeah,
I've heard of the book, but I've never actually read or listened to it. So I'll have to
yeah,
add that one
it's
to my
good.
list. Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. You're definitely very open and frank with this, and I think that's good. That's part of your giving style and giving of the information. So I really appreciate having you
Yeah,
on the show today, and I know the listeners and viewers got a lot out of it as well.
cool. If anyone liked it, let Kevin know so that I can come back.
Awesome, awesome. Well, if anybody wanted to get in contact with you, where can they go?
So, back when I have my website, personal website. It's
Okay.
allenwalton.com, Allen Walton, like Sam Walton, or
Hmm.
Bill Walton if you're on the West Coast,
Okay.
um, and allenwalton.com. I only have like two or three articles on there. Originally, this didn't even exist, and then after I was on Tim's podcast, I was like, dude, I should probably have like a website to like attract, like to have everyone send all of his listeners to find out more. And then they aired the episode like 3 weeks early or whatever, and I had nothing planned, so I
Oh,
just threw up the
geez.
website like real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I only have like a couple blog posts on there. I do plan on writing on it more, and then I have an email list where I send out stuff that I find interesting, like articles or things that I've learned, um, tools for my business, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty active on Twitter too. Username's Allen Third, Third. Um,
Okay.
I'm the third, so and I had to come
Nice.
up with a username. So
It
it's
works.
Allen Third. I'm on there. I'm usually posting about like e-commerce stuff and Simpsons memes. So, but I'm
Nice.
pretty active if you want to get my attention. And yeah, if you want to hear any other podcasts, Tim podcast 2.5 hours. We talk about a lot of the stuff that we talked about here,
Hmm.
plus other stuff. And then I was also on Tropical MBA. And so if you like what you hear here, if you like what you heard here, then I like those podcasts a lot. And I think that if I tried making it all the appearances that I do, like even today, I tried thinking about things that would have been useful for me like 10 years ago or like
Hmm.
5 years ago when I started my company, and what would I find useful back then. So um, yeah, feel free to reach out.
I think you did a great job with explaining the things that you've done along the way, your journey, and some golden nuggets of information for the folks listening and watching. So, thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
Take
Yeah,
care.
absolutely. Thanks, Kev.